Hey, good morning, everybody. This is James Kim, Chairman and CEO of AMCHAM Korea. I am so delighted to kick off this very first session of the Human Resources Virtual Seminar Series. As you know, the HR workshop has been one of AMCHAM's most significant annual events. And this year, to ensure the safety of all the participants, we decided on a virtual format. Today, we're going to discuss a very important topic, and it's called enhancing employee well-being during COVID-19. I think this topic is critical for all of us, especially given COVID-19. The well-being of employees are critical to every company's hiring and the retention factor of all key employees. In fact, I've always believed that talent is the most important asset for any company in the world. Today, our guests are going to talk about insights into how the topic of well-being extends beyond just the physical to emotional, social, and financial aspects. We have two amazing experts from an amazing company called Aon. First, we have Kweon. He is a CEO and head of retirement solutions for Korea's Aon operation. And we have also Amanda Mercep, head of Wellbeing solutions in North Asia. But before I begin, I want to thank our HR committee co-chairs for continuing to think about new ideas that's helpful for all AMCHAM member companies. So without further delay, let me turn it over to Mira Lee. She's a senior human resources manager for GE, and she's also the co-chair of the AMCHAM HR committee. Mira has done a phenomenal job, not just at GE, but helping expand the AMCHAM ecosystem when it comes to HR. So thank you so much. Mira, the floor is yours.
Thank you, James. This is Mira Lee. I am speaking on behalf of my HR committee co-chair colleagues, Yumi Jung from Kelly Service and Matthew Jones from KimHeCham. So for those who joined online, thank you and welcome to the session. So today we'll be talking about enhancing employee well-being during COVID-19. Obviously, employee safety has been the key imperatives to the business continuity and sustainability. And it has been the most focused area for us as HR leaders. But well-being might be a broader concept than the safety, and has a very, various variety of dimensions, to look at. So today, with the distinguished guest speakers from Aon, we'll be hearing about, what is well-being and then impact on the businesses. So as James briefly introduced, Amanda is dialing in from Hong Kong today, and she is leading the well-being solutions for North Asia, which includes Korea. And she also has a wealth of experience in the corporates. She was previously in charge of a wellness team in Goldman Sachs. And Kweon, most of you know him as the CEO of Aon Korea. And in addition to his corporate leadership, Austin is also well known as the thought leader in retirement solutions. So we have seen his articles and speeches a lot. So Amanda and Austin, will present until 10:50, and we will have time for Q&A for about 10 minutes. So please post your questions in the Q&A box in the below of the screen, and we will deal with the questions following the presentations. So now over to you, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Mira, and thank you, James and AMCHAM, for hosting this event today. Again, I think the topic is timely. In the midst of this pandemic, it's been more important than ever that employers focus on well-being. So today we're going to run you through an agenda that I hope meets some of your key objectives. So we want you to walk away recognizing the link between employee well-being and the bottom line, particularly around return on investment or value on investment. Provide you with practical tips on how to leverage the power of data to build your business case. We know through end of year, hopefully many of you are in business planning processes, and having a really well-defined employee value proposition and well-being strategy into 2021 can set you for success in the future. I'm then going to pass it over to Austin to share a bit on financial well-being, which is a bit of a new concept, but we're finding employers in Asia very interested in providing tools and support for their employees to manage their finances and the stress associated with that. And lastly, we'll give you a bit of an exercise to plot where you are on your well-being journey and how to plot a course for the future. So to begin, just to give some broad insights into the well-being landscape in Asia Pacific. We define well-being at Aon as the state of balance where you have the right resources, opportunities, and commitments to achieve your overall best health. And in doing so, we look across 4 key dimensions: emotional, physical, financial, and social. Not surprisingly, because of the pandemic, we find a lot of employers have focused on the emotional element of well-being. But historically, well-being programs have been focused primarily on the physical front. I know in places like Korea and other markets in Asia Pacific, you have health checks, statutory requirements as it relates to occupational health, and those can all fall in the physical space. Again, I'll save financial for Austin, and he'll walk you through some of the key tips that we see that employers can take to build out this particular dimension. But then the last dimension we talk about with our clients is social. And again, so important during these times. The idea here is that as an employer, you can help provide some sense of meaning and purpose at work to your employees. And especially in a work from home or virtual environment, this can be more important than ever. And we'll walk you through some concepts as to how to create this type of camaraderie and environment at work where people feel like they can bring their whole selves. I'm not going to go through every statistic on this slide, but more just to share that there is a lot of data and research behind the effectiveness of well-being programs, and particularly across these dimensions. As the space grows and as we see more employers take up well-being, we see more and more results across. But at a very high level, employees who have access to well-being initiatives are more likely to be engaged in their jobs. They're less likely to leave, so they'll stay at the company for longer. And then from a business perspective, you should expect to see things like higher productivity, profitability, and customer satisfaction ratings. Now, interestingly, you might say, because of all those statistics and research, you know, why is well-being not very prevalent in Asia Pacific? I think it's because in places like North America and even EMEA, many of the healthcare benefits are structured in such a way that well-being was seen as a cost mitigator or a cost reduction measure early on. And it took a bit of time for Asia Pacific employers to take this up. But I do think that this is actually good news for us, because even in the past couple of years, we've seen a number of employers realize the tangible benefits behind well-being and make investments for their employees' health. So we did a lot of research before we set up our Wellbeing Solutions practice. We talked to over 200 HR executives across the region, really to understand what were some of their key objectives and challenges as it relates to setting up well-being programs in their company. So I'd like to take this opportunity to ask the audience today a bit of a participation. Hopefully you're awake on this Thursday morning. But I'd like to ask, what do you think the top reasons are for implementing well-being programs in Asia Pacific? So the poll is going to open. You'll see it pop up on your screen here. And we'll leave it open for, I think, about 30 seconds or so. So why don't you take some time to select your answer if you think the top reason for implementing well-being programs in Asia Pacific. Is it complying with regional or global directive, complying with statutory requirements, increasing employee engagement, enhancing employer brand as employer of choice, reducing healthcare costs or medical spend, or improving productivity and reducing absenteeism? So take a moment to select your answer here. Great. We'll give a second for the results to pop up. Wow, really good guesses. So one for complying with regional and global directive and one for complying with statutory or regulatory requirements. And yeah, I think it's true, especially in places like Asia Pacific and for multinationals that might have a headquarter elsewhere. We do see a lot of our HR contacts in the region wanting to make sure that they're offering consistent benefits. But actually, let's see if I can get to the next slide. Actually, the #1 reason companies are implementing well-being programs are to improve employee engagement. So this is actually really good news for us. I think engagement, especially during these times, is so critical. So engagement not only in the well-being programs, but within one's job. So do they feel connected to their responsibilities and their role? Do they feel as though the work is challenging, but not overburdening, and they have the ability to balance work-life priorities? #4, reducing healthcare costs or medical spend. I do think a couple years ago when people started, or I should say when well-being programs became more popular, there was this idea that, there'd be an ROI or a return on investment. So for every dollar that you spend in well-being, a company could expect to save $4 to $7. More and more employers are realizing, yes, there might be a return on investment, but there are less tangible benefits to well-being. Most importantly, it seems to be the right thing to do during these times. You want to be able to support your people. Okay, second polling question. So this is asking, what is the top challenge for delivering successful well-being programs in the Asia Pacific region? So can we pull up the second poll, please? So if you just scroll down, I'm seeing the first one on mine, but you should see #2. So top challenges, delivering a successful well-being program. Is it A, identifying success metrics, B, lack of resources, C, employee engagement, D, senior management buy-in, E, adequate budget, or F, finding the right vendor? So especially those on the call today that have implemented well-being programs at their organization. And if you haven't, maybe you can use your imagination. What do you think is the top challenge for delivering well-being programs in the region? Give it another minute or so. Okay, maybe we can close the poll and see if we can see the results. Okay, here we go. So majority picked adequate budget. #2 was identifying success metrics. And then I also see employee engagement here. Yeah, great choices. So let's see the results. So actually the #1 challenge for implementing well-being programs is budget, which is, I think an interesting one because yes, it is important that we budget and business plan for well-being programs and initiatives, but they don't necessarily always have to break the bank. There are a number of low and no cost solutions we found in Asia Pacific region. It's just a matter of finding the right vendor, which is the third biggest challenge here. And I think especially for those of you who may have a remit beyond Korea, so for either other locations, all Asia Pacific, the vendor landscape is quite diverse, and you might have to partner with 10, 20 vendors in order to deliver a program like Health Check across all of those locations. So we appreciate how challenging that is. We actually have an individual who helps collate and manage those vendor relationships for our clients. So let's move on. If anyone is interested in reading this study, it's on our website, which we can circulate after. And we are hosting another employer survey focused on well-being, and we'll be sharing the results probably before end of year into early next year. So we're excited to see how some of the findings have changed and how employers have evolved the well-being proposition. I mentioned mental health as, again, one of those dimensions of well-being for focus. And I think it's undeniable the impact of COVID on the mental health of populations around the world, but certainly, again, as employers, we've found that there's a sense of responsibility to provide employees with mental health support during these times. So this was an early cut just post-COVID on some of the challenges, the specific reasons why people were feeling, were under stress as a result of the pandemic, and just including this because I think it's obviously shifted over time. But early days in South Korea, there was a lot of uncertainty about how long it would last, a lot of fear about the economy and the stability of jobs and financial securities, safety of family, the impact on family plans and travel, and then contributing to the spread of the virus, so that idea of responsibility. I also just need to acknowledge that the workforce today is absolutely changing. So in certainly we're seeing multiple generations. So, you know, as you can imagine from a well-being perspective, if you have younger individuals working for your company, those that we say are millennials, they're going to have very different health and well-being needs than people who might be a little bit older, who are closer to retirement. And then in the middle here, we have what's called the sandwich generation, which are those people who might be caring for their young children, but also for their elderly parents. And again, from a well-being perspective, you can think of different types of programs to address your population based on the makeup and how they're split by either by age, certainly, but also thinking about whether you have multiple locations you need to address different cultures for. I just wanted to share some of the key trends that we're seeing impacting all Asia Pacific, but certainly Korea as well. So again, not surprisingly, the need to focus on mental health, reducing stigma and barriers to care. There is a broader, I think, appreciation that well-being can be seen as a powerful recruiting and retention method. So an example of that is if a candidate has 2 job offers, same salary, same benefits, you know, company has the same reputation, they might be looking towards well-being as being a differentiator, and how that employer takes care of their people. It might be the reason why they choose to go with company A over company B. Effective employee communications. So we do find a lot of employers in the region have well-being, but they don't necessarily communicate it well to their employees. And you can imagine that's a missed opportunity. So simple things like making sure your benefits are on an easily accessible intranet page. When you do communicate via email, being really concise. If you do have multiple different types of population, those who might be not at desk jobs in a factory, are you creating communications for them that are very clear and easy to digest? Appetite for financial well-being, so Austin will share more on that. And also recognition that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So this can be a big barrier to implementing well-being. The fact that, yes, you have to consider multiple generations. Yes, you have to consider multiple cultures. But there are certainly tools out there that we're now seeing as being close to a one-size-fits-all solution as it gets. Okay, now in the last 10 minutes here, I just wanted to share some tips on business planning. Wherever you are in your well-being journey, again, hopefully through end of year, you're starting to think about what you want to offer in 2021, how you can continue to support people throughout this pandemic, but also thinking about longer term strategy and planning. So we like to say, have a baseline. We'll talk a bit about what that means for your organization, have a goal in mind, and then crystalline your why. So what are your key objectives for implementing well-being at your company? These are just some examples. Yours might look very different. You know, perhaps you want to reduce risk and reduce healthcare costs. Perhaps it's really important for you as an employer to be known as an employer of choice in the Korea market or in the Asia Pacific market. You want to be known as having those best-in-class benefits. So again, completely different. There is no right or wrong answer, but this is an exercise we find really imperative to laying the foundation of the business plan that you build around well-being. Getting started. So doing an inventory. This can be looking across as many locations as you cover and seeing what's already in place in the well-being space. You might be surprised because I think, especially if for those who are in HR, you think you might have a good idea of what's being offered across, you might find that there are some grassroots initiatives, maybe affinity groups that are doing well-being related type activities, whether it's a women's group or, so these types of things can be considered well-being. Doing an inventory can really help you collate and understand what's on offer. A governance plan. So again, this speaks to compliance and making sure you're offering what's required in your respective markets where you have employees. Benchmarking. So if you are looking to be an employer of choice, of course, you're going to want to know what your peers are offering and what like organizations in your space are offering to their employees. And then deciding whether you want to be leading, mid-market, or you're comfortable maybe being a bit of a follower or looking into trends before you take them up. And then lastly, management. So where is the resourcing coming from? Again, well-being programs are not always expensive, but you do need to make sure you have the people in place as well as the budget to execute. I share this because I think sometimes whether you're a leader in your organization or in HR, you might have a very different perception of what you think your employees need. And just some practical examples here, employee assistance programs are very popular these days. You might see low utilization in your organization and say, well, that's great. It means nobody has mental health issues. It could actually mean that's true, but it could also mean that employees are not aware or they're afraid to access the service because they're not sure if their employer will find out. They have questions about confidentiality. So all these sorts of things are important to consider, which is why we encourage you to talk to your employees, whether you're doing surveys, small focus groups, making sure you're reaching out or having connectivity with different levels of the organization, so people who are senior and more junior, and getting that feedback is going to help inform future well-being interventions for you. So again, make sure in building a business case, you're thinking about aligning your needs to your market and locations in which you have a presence, appreciating your own team's capabilities. We know many people in the HR space wear multiple hats, reward, compensation, benefits, retirement. So well-being we appreciate not everyone has a dedicated well-being resource. So really appreciate your own team's capabilities. Partnering with qualified providers, we talked a bit about that, and then knowing your stakeholders' interests. So we see the most successful well-being programs as those having executive sponsors, senior people that you can bring along the journey, help build consensus, and they become advocates to help you get the resources you need in the future. The power of data. So you might be tracking things in your healthcare benefit plan, in your retirement plan, and especially as you go into renewal season. This is a very common exercise. If you're an Aon client, you work with your Aon representative on this front. But in the well-being space, it could be really challenging to know what to track. So we see some pitfalls from our clients. So just some advice as you think about, okay, if you have your well-being strategy for 2021, what sorts of things should you be considering to track? So one pitfall we see is that employers track everything. And what they think is, the more data, the better. So we're going to, look at program participation, how many people are using employee assistance program, how many people, going in and out of the turnstiles, and how much they're in the office, which might be a bit of a moot point these days. But all this data they have, and then they've used all the resources to track this data, but then there's no ability to do the analysis to have it tell the story. So the other side then would be tracking nothing at all. So not knowing what to track and thinking, okay, because of that, we're just going to sit back, we'll run these programs and not try to prove an outcome. So what we like to say is track with purpose. So go back to your objective. If you are looking to be an employer of choice, why don't you create a survey for new hires to ask them what were the key differentiators by which they picked your company to work at over another. And then from a retention perspective, thinking about asking those questions in exit interviews. So those are just some ideas about how you could track key metrics about the effectiveness of your reward and your well-being interventions back to your overall objective. We are seeing a huge shift in mindset, and I mentioned return on investment, or ROI, earlier. So I won't go into a lot of detail today because we don't have a lot of time, but it's also very technical. But return on investment, again, is that idea of hard return on dollars. So we are seeing a shift to this value on investment, or VOI. And VOI is a bit different than ROI in that it can include a multitude of factors, and it could really be narrowed to what you find important as an employer. I'll give a practical example of this. There's a study from a school, and they essentially offered a well-being initiative to one group of teachers and then did not to the other group of teachers. They then looked at the standardized test scores of children in those particular classes. And they found that the students who were with teachers who had access to well-being programs actually had significantly higher standardized test scores than those teachers that did not have access to the well-being programs. So again, just an example, but what better way to show how effective a well-being program is for a school whose mission is to, produce healthy and productive children, and that being a clear parallel to the well-being initiative that they have. What if you could measure all of these things across your organization easily? And that's where I think we see mobile health, or mHealth, becoming more and more popular. So mobile health, some practical examples: telemedicine, consumer health apps. But these types of tools not only provide a personalized approach for employees, but they also help you as employers get real-time access to data, which can tell you, how physically fit is your employee population? How engaged are they in their jobs? What do they feel? Do they feel as though the company is doing well to serve them in multiple areas? So we've created a tool called Well1, again, consumer health app. At the core of this tool is the health score. So it's a very easy number between 1 and 1,000. And it's comprised of those dimensions we talked about earlier. So physical, emotional, social, and there's a separate financial score, actually. So tools like this, again, can be really impactful. Again, if you're working with in a company where you have a very diverse workplace, everyone has a phone these days. So we're finding that tools like this have a lot of traction in the market. And again, if anyone is interested, you can feel free to reach out to Austin or myself after the session. So I believe we're right on time. So Austin, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Amanda. I think most of you are familiar with the hierarchy of needs theory by Maslow, psychologist Maslow. I think same thing applies to employee needs at work. Employees looking for career success through which he can contribute to the business. In the meantime, this is only possible when his basic needs are sorted out. The basic needs including health and mental well-being and the financial well-being, which I'd like to mention today. Moving on to next page. To be honest, financial well-being is not something traditionally employers are concerning about for their employees. In the past, the fact is employees are typically pretty identical and they work a company for his career and get married, have 2 children, something like that. But now it's very different. They moving around across employers. And the thing is, employers are actually not growing that fast. Their business are not growing that fast as it is used to be in the past. And also they keep transforming to survive. With that, employees face higher risk being redundancies or laid off, things like that. Also, they face higher health risk as they get older. They have higher chronic disease risk, like um, um, circulatory diseases or cancers, and so on. And also their lifestyle changes. So divorce is not uncommon at all. And we have a risk of pandemics like COVID-19, things like that. In these situations, even though your salary is growing as you promote and so on, but anyway, your salary ends at retirement, and the situation around you is getting more complicated. So the financial management between your income and all of those expenses are really important these days. Moving on to next. So I like to introduce the model behavior to the money or financial management for you to really practice. According to the research, we found there are 3 types of money behavior. One is spender and slender and defender. Before I go into the details, I'd like to introduce Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman's research about thinking fast and slow. Daniel Kahneman found that our decision process by brain has two types of decision. One is thinking fast and decide fast, and the other type is thinking slow and decide slowly. Spender is someone who think fast and decide fast based on the short-term joy or satisfaction. Spender who spend without thinking too much about the future. I think naturally most of us can be spender, because in our brain, if the 2 types are fighting, thinking fast and thinking slow fighting, then most of cases thinking fast wins. That's the finding from Daniel Kahneman. And the second one I like to say, and as a model behavior, is defender. Defender is thinking slow and decide slowly based on more holistic view about not only now, but about the future and probability of success, something like that. So this kind of people, they hate waste and has a safety limit, and as a result seeks financial independence. But naturally, we are not the defender. We need to practice. We need to really be binded something to be a defender. Let me talk about that later. And also, we are often spender and defender between. We are often spender and sometimes defender, and we call it slender. And when we do as a spender, we feel guilty and like to be defender, but we cannot maintain that long. Moving on to the next page. So I like to introduce more details about the defender's brain or defender's behavior. To be simple, they try to earn more and spend less. Think about their salary. I don't mean that they earn higher salary than others, but they think salary from a little bit different perspective. They think their salary as an hourly rate after tax. Have you thought about that? Through this, what you can expect is when you spend something, say like $50, then he can understand how many hours he has to work to earn that money to spend something. And this is a really good habit for you to really spend in the right way. And defender is very good at managing or following up government's benefits and employee benefits. I think you are definitely following very good about COVID-19 benefits by the government. And also you are aware of your benefits from your employer, but how detailed you are aware of your employee benefits, like group insurance, in what situations it can be covered by the group insurance your employer provide, something like that. And Defender is also very good at managing discretionary income, which is like an emergency fund. Do you have 6 months salary in the emergency fund? I think Defender really stick to this. I think this is really important for your emergency situations. And Defender also very good at side hustle. In other words, this is your source of second income. I remember Warren Buffett said that the best income is not the salary from your employer, but the income growing every night when you are sleeping, which means like a rent fee from your property or dividends from stocks and so on. It requires definitely financial market or property or real estate market knowledge and so on. But I think this is a really important kind of source income. You have to really think about it. And the other side hustle I like to mention is selling your unused equipment. For example, running machine, you have it, but you don't use it in home, then you can sell it to the in the unused market. This is the behavior of Defenders when it comes to the earning, but also he's looking for spend less, especially discretionary spend. Do you have gym membership which is not used these days in the COVID-19 situations? Or do you have any unused subscriptions but paid automatically? I think I also found there are a couple of apps in my mobile but automatically paid, but I'm not using it. This is a discretionary spend which we can save. And I'd like to mention a little bit more about big expenses and investment in the later slides. Can you move on? There are two types of big expenses. You have to really be conscious. Tax is the biggest expense, but it's very complicated and keep changing by regulation and so on. And generally, we focus more on income tax deduction, but tax is everywhere in every area. So I think this is the area employer coordinate some education to employees regularly, but maybe one expert does not cover everything because it's pretty big and there are lots of issues in different areas. And that is something you have to be really conscious. There are two types of debts. One is to erode your wealth, and the other one is to grow your wealth. Credit card debt is the disastrous one, which has higher interest than anything. So you have to definitely away from that. And the debt for car purchasing is also sadly necessary, but you have to think about it. Warren Buffett again said that do you want to be rich or do you want to look like rich? So you have to really make a decision whether you should be looking for rich or you like to be rich. This gives us good lesson. But there are that's who help growing our wealth, which is like a mortgage. I think you have to manage this very well. And sometimes if you are really aware of the financial market or real estate, then you can borrow to invest. Can you move to next page? I think the defenders are very good at also investment. As I mentioned, this is long-term efforts, not the short-term one. But we are in pandemic. But the stock market, as you see in this chart, stock market keep climbing up from pandemic to pandemic. So what it means is you may not get the success in the short term, but as you learn from failure with your small fund and keep doing it, then you will see the outcome at the end. Moving on to next. To wrap it up, the financial well-being is the ability for your employees to confidentially manage financial life today while preparing for the future and anything unexpected along the way. This is a journey. Both employer and employees need to aware the current status and try to set up some form of mechanism to drive change behaviors to be able to become financially independent and enjoy financial freedom. That's it. And over to Amanda.
Thanks, Austin. And I really like that concept of slender, defender, and spender. I have to do some thinking about what's my spending habit, and also check my apps and see what kind of subscriptions I have that I'm not using. Those are great tips. So we just wanted to leave you with one final exercise before we open it up to questions and answers. Similar to the journey Austin just shared about financial well-being, you can think of yourselves as an organization as being on your well-being journey as well. And in doing so, looking across a spectrum. So from the far left, we see a lot of companies focused on well-being and broader benefits, but maybe just from a compliance perspective. So perhaps they have a short-term outlook. They're looking at some programs, but maybe just across one or so dimension of well-being. And perhaps they only have a part-time resources dedicated to well-being at this time. Then we have organizations who are moons, so more focused on productivity, performance. They might be looking across multiple dimensions. Perhaps they have well-being champions in their organization. Then organizations we see can be stars, so more on engagement, looking across, again, more pillars of well-being. Perhaps they have a dedicated council that supports initiatives internally. And lastly, organizations who are suns. So these organizations really walk the walk. They embody well-being in everything that they do. They're really known for being an employer of choice. So again, we share this with you in hopes that you can consider where you are as an organization. And if you're looking to level up this time or simply maintain, we're delighted to have follow-on conversations with you to learn more about your organizational needs and support if we can. So we now have a good, I'd say 15 minutes for question and answers. We're happy to take anything from the audience. I think you just need to use the chat feature. And Mira, I know you're gonna kindly help us by moderating. So thank you so much for that.
Sure. So Amanda and Austin, thank you so much, for the session with the full of information and insights. So let me look at the Q&A box. We have got 2 questions so far. And by the way, we have overall 47 participants for this webinar, a large turnout. So the first one, what surprised you the most about HR challenges when the pandemic hit?
Wow, I'll take that first. And Austin, if you have anything to add from Korea perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll answer it from a few angles. I think what our clients found our HR clients found most surprising was how quickly they were put in a decision-making seat around the pandemic. So as you can imagine, especially early days when there were decisions about working from home and having to keep up with some of the things that we were hearing around lockdown and using masks and things like that. I think we heard from a lot of our HR clients that said, oh my gosh, we're all of a sudden joining these meetings to make decisions around work from home policies, mask and other PPE distribution. And some of them might have had that experience before, but many did not. And I think it was interesting to see how quickly they rose to the occasion. I think shortly after that time, the shift was really to mental health and supporting our people. And I found very encouraging and inspiring how many of our clients were able to think of tailored interventions. So whether that was health talks to demystify COVID, trainings for managers on how to support their people during this time. And then on an ongoing basis, really trying to consider what are the long-term effects of these flexible work arrangements? How can HR policies really support that? So whether it's, stipends for childcare, whether it's more flexible hours and job sharing responsibilities. I think those are some of the surprises that I personally took away from this experience. Austin, do you have anything to add?
Thanks. I think that's pretty comprehensive. One addition I can add is I think managing the productivity is not only HR's role, but managing productivity is pretty challenging in the COVID-19 home working situations. Actually, as I mentioned earlier, I'm pretty interested in human beings' decision-making process between thinking fast and thinking slow. And naturally, we are not really that self-disciplined, something like that. So we need to have some kind of mechanism to really make us to be more diligent and more connected, something like that. So that's one of the challenges and also opportunity for HR to think about it.
So Austin,
can I add one thing to what Austin said? I think that's such a good point. I feel like I think the net winners from this pandemic are going to be those organizations that continue to build the employee-employer trust relationship. So as Austin said perfectly, especially organizations that really valued FaceTime and, being at your desk and putting in the hours was the indicator of how productive a person was. If you remember those times, it's hard to believe. And now more and more, of course, because you're working from home, you don't have that same, component. And I think because the employers that we see that are really saying, look, so long as you get the work done, of course, we can see when you're online sometime, but really it's a matter of creating that trust level. And that's going to sustain the relationships between the employers and employees over time and just continue to sustain performance.
Great. So perhaps Amanda, you can pick up the second question as well. So it's about, do you have any insights as to the biggest difference among generations? So Gen Z, Millennials, Gen X, or, when it comes down to defining what is well-being?
Yeah, I think, well, I'm kind of in the middle too myself personally. I won't give away my age.
Okay.
I'm somewhat in that sandwich generation we talked about. Yeah, I think the younger population today, I think does have more the power of having more data and more access to information online. And, that leads to a lot of things in the health and well-being space. First, they feel quite empowered by knowledge. If they're experiencing symptoms or something on their own, they very easily go to the internet and they figure it out. They're used to using technologies, so using things like telemedicine, on-demand health and fitness programs, quite popular. And just that information, that ease of getting information for them really does create a sense of empowerment, but it also might be in some ways a challenge because you have to filter through some of this information you find online. And I know we've all seen things related to COVID that, you know, simply not true. I think then, you know, to that middle organization, the sandwich generations, you know, oftentimes from a financial well-being perspective, they're saving for homes, you know, maybe they just bought their first home, but again, they have those dual caregiving responsibilities. And oftentimes they're middle managers, right? So they're at a pivotal point in their career. They feel like they have to really prove themselves and work long hours while managing probably, you know, multiple people and balancing work-life priorities. And then I think the older generation, obviously planning for retirement and, you know, thinking about different challenges in their health, you know, inevitable chronic diseases, but also trying to maintain healthy lifestyle. And so I think across all of those, you know, three groups, multiple different needs to consider. And as an employer, you can imagine how challenging that is to try to target interventions for them accordingly. I hope that was helpful.
Oh, great. So, Amanda, you introduced the tool, I think mobile-based app called Wellbeing. So obviously, you know, that provides some information about yourself. So you talked about the younger generations, you know, like requires more data and information. So for that for that specific tool, does it also support the employer, the companies can aggregate the data?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, mobile health and these types of apps have been around for a very long time, and especially in my previous role and current role, have seen a number of tools in the market. And really the best ones, of course, have a very good user interface and engagement features to keep employees coming back into the app. But the ones that really knock it out of the park are those that have the back end reporting capabilities for HR. So, well, one, again, as an example, because Aon is, you know, a data company in a lot of ways, we spent a lot of time building out those dashboards so that you and the HR team or whoever's running the initiative can see aggregate anonymized results. So not only the health score and the financial score, but broken out across key factors like fitness, obesity, smoking, you know, just general physical activity and the like. And then we're also able to report on how many people are engaging with the app and how some of those behaviors can, you know, you in the HR seat can work towards improving. I think a lot of the apps you see, you know, you implement them and then that's it. And of course you see a high spike because people are interested in it, but then they don't go back in it over time. So we're really proud of Well1 because we feel like we've solved for a lot of those factors.
Okay, great. So we have a, you know, streaming of questions coming in. So third question is, you know, about hosting your session. So in your experience, how responsive have employees been in financial well-being trainings? What would make such trainings better?
I think there are very few, I mean, almost no comprehensive financial well-being training, even though we see tax training and some, how can I say, personal financial management training by an insurance company or bank, something like that. But the risk of that kind of training is there are conflict of interest. So they're looking for more way they sell more products, their own products. So I think this is not really comprehensive for employees to really trust and get an objective view. So I think we need more objective and independent training for employees and some with practical tips.
Yeah, so I mean, I personally find your session very enlightening. And I realized that I'm a defender. I'm not a defender at all. So something, like I need to work on. And, like in your profile, I saw that, you are expert in behavioral finance. I didn't know what that means until, listening to your session. So obviously, as a company, we should think about how to help the employees, to manage their finance holistically, like beyond, like I said. Okay, so the next question is from Elizabeth Yu. Perhaps, to Amanda first. So Amanda talked about the need for trust building between employer and the employee. Do they think technology, like the wellness app, helped with that or hurt? For example, are employees concerned about being tracked and privacy concerns?
Yeah, great question, Elizabeth. And I think it's so true. Especially today, there's a lot of uncertainty and fear from employees on what their employers know about them. And of course, there are a number of data privacy laws across the globe now that have been put in place for some time, but I think the level of seriousness that employers need to take to them has increased significantly. So just as to level set, well, one, we've complied with GDPR and HIPAA regulations, which are some of the most strict data privacy laws out there. And because it's a third party, you as an employer should be confident that your employees' data is protected. Now, thinking about it from an employee lens, it again makes a lot of sense. Like I don't think if anyone was in HR, they would also maybe have these types of questions as to what their employers can know about them and how that might be used, negatively in their respective career. So I think, the key here is to communicate, and certainly in Well One, but in some of the best, mobile health or mHealth programs we see out there, they're very upfront around how their data is used and how everything that is reported back to the employer is used on an anonymous or aggregate basis. And the last thing I would say is, technology, I think we would all say as a result of pandemic, personally, my mobile technology use has spiked, and I realized it, a month or two into the pandemic, and realized, this just isn't healthy for me. And so I started personally, and I know a lot of other people and employers too have taken this very seriously. And there are a ton of apps that monitor how much time you spend on your phone, and just having little reminders to put it down sometime. Especially working from home, a client said to me the other day, we're not so much working from home, we're living at work. And I thought that was so true. There's no disconnect, there's no commute, there's no start or stop time, and you could very easily work into the night, which is why I think it's more important than ever that we use technology responsibly and wisely.
Great. So unfortunately, we have only 1 minute left for that session, but I'm sure that there are so many outstanding questions, from the participants. But I think, we will conclude the session today. So thank you once again so much for Amanda and Austin for the great sessions, and then such a, relevant topic for us at this extraordinary times. So, and also great thanks to the people who joined and then also asked great questions. And, have a great day. And then we'll see you in the next series of the HR Committee webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mira.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, team.